After 25 long years on the heavily reused road backgrounds, Ash Ketchum, history's most well-traveled fifth grader, has finally reached the end of his Pokémon journey. And I'd love to talk about that momentous occasion and everything that's built up to it over the decades, but Shogakukan Productions really doesn't like it when YouTubers make videos about their anime, so out of respect/fear for them, we're gonna celebrate in a different way, by looking back to the very beginning of Ash's journey, and a time when the corporate grip on Pokémon wasn't quite so tight. A time before the Pokémon Company was even a thing, back when Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc. were still feeling out what the future of the franchise would look like, when the games were still brand new and experimental Poké projects were being spun off into production left and right to capitalize on the sudden hype, helmed by all sorts of companies and people who you'd never see touch the brand nowadays, including a certain manga by a prolific hentai artist, which I'm gonna tell you all about in just a sec, but first, a very special ad break.
Hey twerp, now that we've quit crime to start a family.
Wait, you guys were straight? Yup, I'm canonically preggers. Meow! That's right!
Anyway, I was wondering how your Pokemon got so good at kicking our asses. What's your secret?
Oh, that? It's all about diet, my friend. First, you gotta figure out your Pokemon's favorite food. Like, Fearow really loves dumplings, while Pikachu's all about the jelly donuts.
Oh, we've already got that down.
Our babies are very well fed. Meowth! That's right! Great! You just gotta inject that food with Supps energy formula. The electrolytes will keep your Pokemon hydrated, while the mix of caffeine and focus supplements gives them the energy and will to win at any cost. Plus, it tastes delicious.
So when your Pikachu climbed in that Dragonite's mouth to shock it?
Yep, Supps.
And when your Charizard almost tore that other Charizard's throat out?
All Supps, baby!
And you don't think that's a little dangerous to feed to animals?
Nah, he loves it, see? Pika Pika! Pika!
Well, you're the Pokemon Master. I'll go buy some at the link below, and I'll be sure to use the promo code BASEMENT for 10% off.
Meowth! That's right! How about him? Is he okay?
No, he hasn't been the same since the accident.
In October 1997, monthly shonen magazine Koro Koro Comic introduced a third Pokemon manga to its lineup, which sounds kind of excessive, and definitely was. The series would only run for 2 years into 1999, while their other manga kept going until basically present day, but at the time, you can see how it made sense. Koro Koro's earliest take on the series, Pocket Monsters, was this weird little gag manga full of crude potty humor that didn't really capture the adventurous vibe of the games. Pokemon Adventures, which launched in April 1997, was filling demand for that sort of story with its interpretation of player character Red and his rivals Blue and Green, and it did such a good job of that, you can see my video to see how long it's been running. But then, in April, the unexpectedly explosive popularity of the anime suddenly created a new market for stories specifically about Ash and Pikachu. Thus, Dengeki Pikachu was born, with the aim of exploring the world and characters kids were coming to know and love from the show in ways you just couldn't get away with in a weekly TV anime, such as letting them change their clothes on the regular instead of spending years wandering in the wilderness in the same shirt and jeans like the world's smelliest Poké-drifters. But also in more substantial ways. Mangaka Toshihiro Ono drew his Pokemon with a more detailed, naturalistic look that let them be, at times, downright scary, playing up the idea that these are mysterious, potentially dangerous wild animals, not just helpful little cartoon buddies hanging out in the grass waiting to be your new best friend. And in contrast to the contemporary look of Adventures, he also gave his world a bit of a sci-fi edge, which really comes through in some of the crazy mecha and other vehicles that Team Rocket pilot throughout the series. Dude was clearly an Eva and Gundam fan. Story-wise, the series expands quite a lot on the inner workings of the Pokemon League, envisioning a world where these critters are a little more strictly categorized and regulated than we see in the anime, where every kid still gets to go on a Pokemon journey, but only the top trainers get to take a permanent leave from school and actually make a career of it, which adds some much-needed stakes and tension to Ash's quest to be the very best like no one ever was, while giving him and the people and Pokemon around him a little more grounded depth as characters. Even Team Rocket benefits from this. As Ash is getting ready to enter his first league tournament, Jesse and James reveal that they used to be bright-eyed kids just like him, until they failed as career trainers, realized they'd skipped too much school to get normal jobs, and turned to lives of crime. Yeah, this manga gets a little dark, definitely darker than the anime, and as you might expect if you know anything about 90s kids, that darker take on the anime's ideas made it a huge hit. Or at least it was a hit stateside. When Viz Comics published their first translated chapter of The Electric Tale of Pikachu in 1998, flipped and reworked for a standard American floppy comic format, it wasn't just the best-selling manga in the US, but the best-selling comic book, period. The first title to move over 1 million copies of a single issue since the comic crash began in 1993. By the end of its run in February 2000, the series had sold a total of 7.25 million. A very respectable number that kind of makes you wonder why they'd cut it so short at just 20 chapters, until I show you this picture of a Poke Center lady in a plug suit with Pokeball boobs, and you go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Told you he liked Ava. So, yeah, Ono, who, according to MAL, also began publishing another 20-chapter manga titled Anal Justice under a pen name that same year, took some, shall we say, creative liberties with the character designs of the Pokemon anime. And, as you might expect, Viz in turn had to take some liberties with his artwork when translating that series for American audiences. When they weren't able to just cut entire scenes for sexual content, that is. But the crazy thing is, this stuff wasn't just too hot for puritanical America. Ono even had to go back and redraw a lot of this stuff for the Japanese tankobon releases, such as those Pokeball nipples, though they did let him leave the Pokeball logo on that plug suit's incredibly detailed ass, which we'll probably have to crop or block here to keep YouTube happy, so you'll just have to trust me that she's got quite the gap down there. Unless, of course, you're watching the uncensored version of this on Patreon, hint hint, wink wink. Now, all of that is toned down substantially in the back half of the series, possibly to avoid having to do more redraws, though even if it was on direct orders from Nintendo, Ono didn't let that stop him from confirming that Ash and Misty canonically f***ed in a bathtub during the epilogue. The same epilogue in which Jesse and James are confirmed for not gay. In fact, they're the ones who deliver the letter to Ash's mom in which he brags about the bathtub thing. Golly, there's a lot of layers to that, and I don't want to get into any of them. In that same chapter, the X-Rockets also deliver a letter to May, Gary Oak's sister, because in the manga's version of events, he and Ash end up going on a journey together after the Orange League finals, alongside Misty, Brock, and Richie, that kid who beat Ash in the Indigo League. And their letters imply that they're getting up to all kinds of shenanigans outside the bathtub, including bumping into this absolutely sick Lugia, which plays into what I think is Electric Tale of Pikachu's greatest strength as a manga, the thing that still makes it worth reading all these years later, even if you're not nostalgic for it. It does some really fun and interesting things with these characters. Gary, for instance, isn't nearly as much of a one-dimensional dickhead here as he was in the anime. He still talks a lot of trash about Ash, don't get me wrong, but there's subtext there that he's trying to push his rival to live up to all the boasts that he used to make when they'd watch the Pokemon League together and be better than some loser dragging a rat he found in his walls around Viridian City on a leash. You know, like, Ash is kind of pathetic at the start here. You can see why Gary'd be a little mad at him. There's a spirit of friendly, if heated competition between the two of them, and when they do finally meet up at the league amateur tournament, Gary is genuinely glad to see his buddy there. I also really love what the manga does with Gary's grandpa. See, Ash kind of has to make do with training a rat he caught chewing through their TV cable, because Professor Oak isn't just hanging around Pallet Town handing out starters like some sort of video game NPC. He's off on his own adventures, studying the Clefairy and the wilds of Mount Moon alongside Bill as his research assistant, living among them as a sort of cosplay hobo Jane Goodall and subsisting on convenience store rations and leaving a 6-year-old me who'd never heard of ramen wondering what exactly that spiky spiral thing on his cheek was. Oh, quick sidebar on that note. As someone who was 2 years old when TNG went off the air, I also absolutely did not appreciate what a great joke it was to have Ash nickname his partner Jean-Luc Pikachu in the first couple chapters. Anywho, Ash runs into the professor while hunting for rare Pokémon after splitting up with Misty following their gym battle, trying to raise his rank because apparently you can, skip gym badges by getting a rare enough Pokemon. It's not entirely clear. Doesn't matter, because he loses that mercenary attitude after he, Oak, and Bill become the first people ever to witness a Clefable evolution ceremony, opening his eyes to the wondrous side of the Pokemon world and kickstarting his growth from that cocky, gotta-catch-em-all brat into someone with a genuine love for Pokemon and a real passion for adventure. And when Oak returns in a later chapter, both Brock and Misty end up being crazy jealous, not just of that experience, but his relationship with the professor as a whole, who's sort of a celebrity in this version of the Pokeverse. In keeping with that portrayal, his second appearance is actually televised, a debate with this conspiracy crackpot who's trying to sell a book about how Clefairy are secretly space aliens, which leads to this whole fun adventure where they discover a Clefairy colony living on stolen goods in the sewer of a city, and we find out that Clefairy build their nests with this crystalline secretion from the back of their throats. Gross. But gross in a kind of cool Animal Planet sort of way. A lot of the stories that Ono chose to adapt from the TV series, and the ones that he wrote for himself, emphasize exploring how Pokemon live in their natural habitats and adapt to human ones, as well as how human cultures are shaped by the Pokemon around them, which makes for an interesting take on the lore that stands apart from both adventures and the anime. In what's probably my favorite chapter, or at least the one I remember most vividly from when I was a kid, Ash ends up training under Sabrina at her gym, but then she disappears and comes back in a coma, and he ends up butting heads with the Black Fog, this genuinely spooky Gigantamax-size haunter that's been terrorizing the countryside for untold years, and apparently ate her soul using Dream Eater, which is something that does a lot. He and some other trainers out for revenge on this thing for apparently killing some of their Pokemon and other loved ones, end up chasing it all the way to Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town, which the manga reimagines as this super cool ancient Tower of Babel analog. And inside, they find evidence that the people who built the tower worshipped that haunter and other Pokemon as gods, which explains why it's been on that petty rampage ever since, and why twice in a row, when it's on the verge of capture, the first time with this super cool giant-sized Pokeball, the second time with a regular Hyper Ball after Ash has tuckered it out in battle, the Haunter chooses to self-destruct and ultimately kill itself instead of losing its pride by submitting to humans. It's pretty darn metal for a Pokemon story, and that's not the only time this manga goes to dark places. For example, instead of losing by an unsatisfying technicality in the Pokemon League because his Charizard fell asleep refusing to fight a much weaker Pikachu, Ash chooses to drop out when it becomes clear that there's no other way to stop his vicious, poorly trained beast from mauling or potentially killing Richie's Charizard, even though he'd almost certainly have won if he let the fight continue, which I think makes for a much more interesting and nuanced character beat and creates a neat little arc when a better trained Charizard proves vital in Ash's eventual victory against Orange League champ Drake. Of course, that's also how it went down in the anime version of the Orange Islands, which had a lot more time to develop their relationship between those matches instead of just saying, by the way, Ash trained Charizard a whole lot off screen before this happened, but the battle itself is a lot more intense in this manga form, and the fact that the manga's story actually ends there instead of continuing on and contriving a reason for Ash to give up his best mon to balance out the power scaling of the Johto League makes this finale very satisfying to go back to, even without all the ship confirmations that people might want in the epilogue. The sense of finality created by the choice to just cut it off there is a prime example of what I was talking about in Let Goku Die. Still, I wouldn't quite say the ending is the best part of Dengeki Pikachu. What I really love is how the manga makes the world of the anime feel lived in and, more importantly, bigger than Ash and his journey. Like, even though Team Rocket show up in pretty much every chapter after they're introduced, they're always doing their own thing that just happens to bring them into conflict with our hero, or sometimes leaves them crashing in his hotel room. They're not just trying to capture Pikachu every single week. Even Brock and Misty get to do their own thing instead of being simple sidekicks, following their own path through the world that only occasionally intersects with Ash. They do end up traveling together for a bit, but in the end they split off and go on their own journeys to train up their own Pokémon for the League, which makes them feel a little more three-dimensional and driven, and also helps to eliminate the potential redundancies that come with having a version of Ash who's nearly as thirsty as the Pewter City leader breeder. Which brings us back to the topic that a lot of you probably clicked on this video for, and man, I really don't want to be accused of clickbaiting with that, but also it's a total minefield of creepy implications, so Yazzie! I need you to help me talk about the horny stuff!
What you need, Jeffy?
Could you please tell all the fine folks at home about all the shocking censored content in the Electric Tale of Pikachu?
Okay, but I mean, there's not really that much to tell. Like, 90% of the censorship was just painting over the big honkin' titties that he drew on everyone. Like Gary's sister, Misty's sister, everyone who works in the Pokemon Center, and especially Jessie. She's got these absolute torpedoes under her Team Rocket tee that Ono loved putting front and center pretty much all of the time from the second she's introduced. Like, the very first time we meet her and James, it takes all of 3 pages for this feral cave boy who was raised by Kangaskhan to start sucking on him. So, yeah, that whole joke had to just be cut entirely. And basically every other page she's on had to be redrawn to flatten out her chest and black out all that definition on her butt and stomach. Which must have been double trouble for Ono, because not only did he put that stuff everywhere, but he clearly poured a lot of, love into drawing it. And that clearly took its toll, because by the time they reached the Orange Islands, even though that is prime bikini territory, he's got her wearing this very modest zip-up vest and skirt. I'm calling you out, Nintendo. Let Jessie be hot, you cowards.
I think that's a statement we can all get behind. But, of course, Jessie's not the only girl in the cast who gets that treatment.
Yeah, you can't blame anyone for deciding to clumsily paint some wetsuit over Misty's Slinkini for that cerulean gym battle. But for the most part, the manga's depiction of her wasn't really that extreme. In the same chapter that Jessie's introduced, she shows up in a pretty thick jacket, and from that point forward, we never really see her wearing anything more revealing than what's in the anime. The chapter before that, though...
The one with the Pokeball nips?
Yeah, that's the one. This is definitely the lewdest this manga gets. In chapter 6, Misty lets it all hang out in this extra skimpy version of her classic outfit, and she takes center stage on every page. Every page. She also gets mighty thirsty for Mikey, you know, that little kid who doesn't want to evolve his Eevee.
Wow, that's... What is he, 8?
That part's pretty weird, and it got left in the English release somehow. In the original Koro Koro magazine run of this chapter, Mikey's family also has a maid who waits on Brock in the hot springs while she's wearing nothing but an apron. And he had to draw in a towel in that ending gag where Misty starts splashing Evolution Stone mineral water onto her boobs to try to make them grow bigger, and she realizes that she's in a mixed bath, giving all of the boys a splashy show.
Damn, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, Viz just cut those last 2 pages altogether. What can you do? Which doesn't hurt the story at all, and that's good, because otherwise I really like this chapter's take on that episode of the anime. In the manga, Mikey's family is not just some pack of evolution-obsessed weirdos, they're part of a whole cult of evolution-obsessed weirdos, the Knights of the E-Stone, whose frog hats are exclusively reserved for trainers who evolve their Pokemon with a stone. It makes for this really fun, goofy little side story, and it's that goofy side of Dengeki Pikachu that keeps me coming back to it. Instead of going all out on Poke battles every single chapter, the manga feels like it's a best selection of basically filler episodes. We get a lot of fun asides where it's just the Pokemon hanging out and being Pokemon with their Pokespeak translated to English for us, of course. The bit in the Orange Islands where Ash has to hunt down a rogue Snorlax before it gobbles up an entire orchard's harvest is a riot, and the bonus chapter where Gary and Ash take on Team Rocket's genetically engineered ultra-relaxing Slowpoke is just peak Pokemon. Love it.
Oh yeah, that chapter was a riot. I love the subplot where Bill and Oak catch the talking Meowth and try to dissect him.
Yeah, it's got some dark moments and some character drama mixed in there, but this manga really tapped into that relaxing slice of Poke Life vibe that made the Sun and Moon anime the best a full 20 years early. It's absolutely chock full of cute little gags and top-tier jokes, and it still really holds a special place in my heart.
Mine too. Nowadays, it's mainly remembered as that weird Pokemon manga that was drawn by a hentai artist, but there really is a lot more to the Electric Tale of Pikachu, and I hope this video gives some of you a push to go check it out for yourselves.
Although it has been out of circulation for quite a while, possibly because of that hentai association, so if you do want to pick it up without dropping hundreds of dollars on vintage comics, you'll have to go through, unofficial channels.
Speaking of channels, Yazzy's done a lot of great manga reviews over on Best Girl's Basement if you enjoyed her part in this one. And for my part, I've got a new-ish Twitch channel where starting this month, I'm going to be streaming regular anime discussions, including coverage of the new seasonals that don't make it into the ones to watch. Links below and all over this end screen to all the stuff I was just talking about. We're Geoff and Yazzy, professional Poke fans, signing out from our secret base.